Today we're going to be talking research, and it's specifically radio's unique value proposition. Well, what does that mean? Well, in a nutshell, why do people come to radio stations to begin with? Hey Buckaroos, welcome back, Musicom Academy. Today we're doing research again. It's a different type of research though than what we did before. Same person, Jeff Vidler. And welcome, Jeff. Thanks for being back on again.
How are you?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's been almost a year since you were first on.
That was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to this as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, me too. And it's funny, you were actually the first person that I kind of got into interviewing online, which was like a whole different deal for me. So here we go again. For those of you who are watching right now, if one of the benefits of being old and being in radio for so many years is you get to see different things, come about. And one of the things that happened in the 80s was a thing called usage. And that became, the flavor of the month, usage. And it was really simple stuff, and people just made it up. And it would be stuff like, people at the office use the radio as background, or people use it to pick themselves up, or stuff like that. No research behind it. It was just kind of, it was just guesses and stuff. But now Jeff's company, Signal Hill Insights, has done a thing called Radio on the Move 2022, and it explores the radio landscape and radio's unique value proposition, which is where we are now, which is taking that usage thing and putting it on steroids and actually doing it for real. So what are we going to see, Jeff, for this?
Well, this is some work that we've been doing over the last few years. As the audio landscape gets more crowded and there's more competition there, is really trying to get an understanding about radio as a medium and what are radio's unique value propositions relative to those other audio alternatives, whether music streaming, podcasts, and other kinds of, music that's been around for a long time. The personal music, when people put on the music they've downloaded, or a CD, or now vinyl, how is that different from listening to radio? So that helping people in the medium understand more about, okay, now that the competitor isn't just that guy across the street. Mm-hmm. It's really about all the other ways you can listen to audio, understanding where does radio perform best? What do people go to radio for that's different from the other media? And also, where does it compete as well? So with Radio on the Move this year, Radio on the Move is generously sponsored by Radio Connects, which is Canada's marketing radio body. But talk to them, and we wanted to look at that a little more deeply and get a better sense of the need states that people have when they listen to radio, and also when they listen to other types of audio. So just to get a better feel for that.
When you say need states, for people who are watching now, mainly PDs, it would be what they're looking for, whatever medium it is, what they're looking for, why they're going there in the first place.
Right. What job is it performing? Right.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Good. Yeah. I just want to kind of make it really clear, because again, a lot of the people would be starting out as PDs, and some of this is new. Other people are like, okay, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, all that usual stuff. Yeah.
What are the things that they're looking for radio to do relative to the other types of audio that are available?
I was looking at the graphs, ahead of time, obviously, and I was sort of curious for, as you'll see when we throw up the graphs, and there are phrases and things and what the needs are. How did you come up with those? Are those phrases that would have popped up here and there on radio research over the years? And Jeff has done, I don't know, probably thousands of radio research things over the years. So I would assume you would have seen people saying these things, and then that's how why don't we actually just research these things? Or was it different?
Yeah, it actually comes from a combination of a couple of things. It is from all those years of focus groups and other studies where you hear listeners talking about how they're using different types of audio, how they're using radio, but also comes from there's a body of work in media research around the whole notion of need states, that people are using different media in general for different need states. So some of these things are things that people use other media outside of audio for as well. What you're going to see today is just from Radio on the Move 2022. This is, the study was in field in March or April. We have a big sample here, which is really nice, more than 4,000 Canadian adults. And that allows us to kind of slice and dice the data a number of ways, and really works well for this type of thing where we are looking at people who listen to different types of audio. We can really break that down. So if you want to throw up the first slide, I can sort of explain here's what we did with these questions around, again, what I call need states.
Okay. Slide's up right now. Before we start going through the slide, your best guess on this, because you do a lot of research in the U.S. too, across not only audio and radio and stuff like that, but across other brands that have nothing to do with media, other things. But would you say that the results of this, in your best guess, is going to be pretty similar in the U.S.? That people would be act roughly the same way?
Yeah, great question. Actually, Fred Jacobs picked up on some of the work we were doing. So he asked the same questions. He does that big tech radio survey every year with, he has like 40,000 people from actually Canada and the US, mostly US, who are in radio station databases, who they send out surveys to people in the databases and ask them a whole bunch of questions. And the amazing study. But he asked some of the same questions that we asked here. And it was really very interesting to see that it was very close. Again, that was with sort of engaged radio listeners, people who are, not your sort of average American or Canadian, but of the engaged radio listeners who also listen to other types of audio as well.
So fairly universal, no matter where you're watching this, probably anywhere in the world, it's probably going to shake out kind of roughly the same. All right, well, let's go through this. And this is a graph one that you're looking at right now. And so take us through this, Jeff.
Yeah. So here's what we did. We asked regular users of each type of audio, those situations or those need states in which they use each type of audio. And the results are shown here in what we call a spider graph.
Right.
And easy way to interpret this is the closer the line for each type of audio gets to each one of those need states around the periphery, the more its listeners use that type of audio to satisfy that need state.
How are they answering this? Is this like a 1 to 10, or are you throwing out that to them? In other words, these phrases, and they're giving you some sort of score on them, or?
That's right. If they identify themselves in this case of being people who listen to their own personal music, whether it be CDs, downloads, or vinyl or whatever, once we've identified them as that, we then ask them what those needs that they have that each of this type of audio will satisfy. And they, literally on an online survey kind of check off, oh yeah, I listened to it for that, I listened to it for that, I listened to it for that, and they leave the other things. And what we're looking at here are regular users. So these are people who at least once a week, or at least in the past week, have listened to music streaming online, or have listened to their personal music. So what you're seeing here is you see that these two lines are really incredibly similar between the two. There's really almost fundamentally no difference there. The only thing I think that you see a little bit is that for that line that represents personal music, again, your own personal music, that kind of moves a little closer to, when I have my me time, which kind of makes sense because your own personal music, it's not a utility that's in the background. This is something you're kind of diving into. This is music you really care about. So, that would make sense that a little bit accentuated there. But really, it really does help to prove the point that music streaming is really kind of an extension of our CDs or music that we listen to. It's an extension of personal music. People have gone, though, just from owning that music to renting it, right? When they listen to music streaming.
Yeah, just a technological leap. That's pretty much it. That they don't have to buy. Now it's, they got a bigger library and they can carry it around with them, assuming you're on Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
Okay, so bringing radio into the picture, this looks dramatically different. And take us through this, because this is where, if you're a radio PD, you really want to be like, okay, what's this telling me and what should I care about? What matters and what doesn't really.
So, the big thing here really is that radio connects, right, with people. You can see that, to get information is certainly there. And one thing that's very different, obviously, from listening to music. But, if you look at sort of the top right side of that graph, you can also see things like to learn something new, to connect with others, for companionship, all of those things. Radio really performs a function that listening to music doesn't. We can also see, though, that there are those areas where it is in the same kind of zone as music listening. You do listen to music to be entertained. you listen to radio to be entertained. Presumably a different kind of entertainment, frankly, but you're still kind of, that's a place where, when I want to feel entertained, I can have a choice between listening to the radio or listening to streaming. And again, what is it that radio can do that's different about how it entertains? And I think, what you see in the top right part of that graph tells you a little bit about, companionship, connection, and information that it can also be entertaining, right?
Yeah, I know when I first saw this thing, and what immediately kind of came to mind is and I'm going to say full service, and I don't mean like a news talk or anything like that. A full service radio station where you're not just doing IDs and just playing music, and hardly anybody does anything. The jocks don't really entertain. The jocks don't say anything. Basically, it's just a music box. Versus this thing where you can see where actually that's where the opportunity is. If you will have a radio station and you want to actually do better than somebody else, you had better step up and do this. I'm sure you must be familiar with it because you would probably do research in the Edmonton market. Familiar with Now Radio?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great example. Yeah. And now, I would think if you kind of laid one of these over Now Radio, it's like clocking every one of these things, I would assume, because they do a huge amount of information, and you're definitely learning things at times, and and all that other stuff. So many things come to mind on this. That learning something, getting information. The John Test show immediately jumps to mind because it's built on that. That's the whole thing. Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to get that from listening to Spotify, right?
No, this is definitely radio's domain for sure.
No kidding. And you use the example of Now Radio. I mean, that format is all about listener interactions. Mm-hmm. They're interacting through text and phone lines. I mean, never a text goes unanswered on that radio station. So,
really?
That whole business about connecting with others, they really do deliver that in spades. And they've been, very successful. And they're, 12 years they've been on the air. I think they're been number one, 25, 54, and 48 out of 49 currency periods or something like that. So
they're a huge juggernaut. Gary Berkowitz, who is a consultant out of Detroit, we did a thing where we were just talking about Now and, listening to it, picking it apart, the usual, and it's a interesting station, and it's a good radio station, obviously, great ratings, and it would pretty much look like this, and it's probably why they're number one perennially forever, seemingly. When you look at this as as radio PD guy that you used to be, does anything else sort of stick out to you that you would be like, oh, I'd be really trying to lean into this or that, or avoid whatever, that kind of thing?
This is obviously showing radio as one whole thing. So, to get information, purely to get information, well, it's going to be something that's, more typical, maybe of a news station or a sports station or whatever. I think if you are a music station, you are still competing with, music listening on some of those, need states. Again, you have the added advantage in a station like Now is a music station, but it does have that connection and companionship element that it brings to the table, and much stronger than, as you said, music box kind of radio stations. But still, for music radio stations, you do see areas, Lift My Mood. It's one that radio, I think, solved that problem for people. We go back to, you said, the 80s, how people used radio. One of the ways that people use radio was just to elevate my mood. Well, and I think radio can still do that. And you can see people still use it to do that, but you got to bring other things to the table. Going back to the AM FM that you were talking about, do you ever separate them in any way? Or down the road? You sort of nailed an area that I think, as we kind of move through this and start spending more time looking at this, we need to actually break that down, looking at it by different types of listeners. And I mentioned the Fred Jacobs tech survey. They have that huge sample. So they were able to kind of break it down a little bit by format and see how it varies by format. You do see some of the things you would expect to see. For example, News Talk, Get Information is going to be higher on that list than it would be for a listener to an urban station or an AC station. We're still early days in terms of looking at this and getting that understanding of what that means, not just for radio as a medium, but for specific formats and things as well. On the radio thing, which also sort of struck me, because, every time I ever have anybody on, I kind of want to ask some questions, so it's kind of like you're really thinking about some of this stuff as I was looking over this. And one of the things I was wondering about,
or would it be possible, or how hard is it, or any of all of those questions combined to actually track, okay, here's the people's needs, and we know that, and they're on the graphs versus what they actually get, in their mind, like, oh, I really want information that's a 9 out of a 10, let's just say. But usually when I go to radio, I only get a 6 or 5. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. I guess it would depend on the station where they go, I suppose.
To be able to sort of, which time was looking at those gaps, right?
Yeah.
Where this is what I would like to use it for. And you could really look at, I think, at radio stations individually to see, are they, how are they performing on the same graph? Are they missing some key point on that graph?
Yeah.
When you listen to this radio station, what do you listen to it for?
That would seem like it would be a really good thing to know if you're one of the major radio companies, and you want to, and you're looking at all of your stations dwindling, like, what do I do different than everybody else to pick it up? And, just as an overall.
Yeah, well, and because, what we're doing here is we're looking at how does radio as a medium compared to other types of audio.
Other audio.
But really taking that next step is actually saying, okay, so how am I performing against what people come to radio for relative to the competition? And am I in the right place for people who like this format and the kind of things they go to that format for? Am I performing as well as my competition on each of those things? Absolutely. And again, it might mean we have to get a bit more granular with some of this as well. But I don't think we get into something like the station that plays 10 in a row. I'm not sure anybody listens to radio like that.
That's meaningless anymore, I would think. Really, they go, hey, this is Spotify. I would play 12,000 in a row. If you paid the extra $10. If not, well, not so much.
Or the station that gives traffic and weather on the ones. I don't think But so there's a limit to how granular you get, because people don't listen to the radio or listen to audio for those things. They think about it in a much more general sense of, oh yeah, okay.
The podcast one, which you do, and you do a lot of podcast research and podcast stuff, working with companies and people. That one looks, a bit different again. You want to take us through this one?
Yeah, more similarities certainly than there is with music, and I think suggests that podcasting in its own way is a more closer competitor, I guess, to radio in a sense. I think, though, there's one dimension that we aren't measuring here, which is radio's live. And podcast is archived in that sense. So that brings in a whole different dimension here than what we're seeing. But you can see just in on a spoken word level, certainly, you're looking at something that's going to be very similar.
Were people on this screened for podcast versus video cast? I'll tell you why I'm asking. Like, when I hear, for me, because I don't listen to that many podcasts, like audio podcasts. There's a few, but not that many. But I watch an enormous amount of video podcasts. But to me, they're a podcast. There really is no difference between like Joe Rogan on YouTube. He is obviously the video version of Joe Rogan audio on Spotify. Is any distinction in this when you were doing that?
What we try to do to keep it focused on audio podcasts is say that do you listen to digital audio or do you listen to podcasts, that is digital audio files that you can download to listen to later or stream on demand? Anybody that does an audio podcast, that qualifies. Well, Joe Rogan, that still qualifies because it is a digital audio file I can download and listen to later, but I can also watch it as well. So when we ask the question about podcasting, it is something that lives as an audio file.
Yeah, as
well as perhaps on video as well, but not something that might be available exclusively on video. Can I ask you a question?
Sure, whatever you like.
Does it surprise you to see podcasting so strong on that, to learn something new, being that's, if you say, geez, what's podcasting's advantage over radio? Big advantage. Does that?
No, not at all, because, it's funny. Back when, when I was a GM and also PD and stuff, I would look at some shows and now, hold that thought. And I watch an enormous amount of YouTube videos and they run the gamut. It'd be Rogan, it would be Stern, it'd be, how to actually do video editing. I would say probably for me, 80 to 90% on YouTube of what I go looking for is how to learn something. something specific. So this is not a surprise. But also, there's a morning show that was incredibly strong in Toronto. It was on Chum FM for years and years and years. Roger, Rick, and Marilyn, and then Roger and Marilyn, and when you dissect those shows, they gave an enormous amount of information. It's in small clips, but when they start talking about something, it wouldn't be like, you're giving me fluff. You're saying stuff that I don't care about. I don't care what you ate for breakfast, or who cared who you hung around with. There'd be stuff like, thanks for telling me that. And Stern too, and particularly Stern's videos now on YouTube, when he's interviewing stars, it's like, they say stuff where you're like, wow, I had no idea about that. And like, wow, I didn't know you immigrated from Russia, and your father, was in the gulag, and yet you made it to become a movie star, and it's fascinating stuff. So no, it doesn't surprise me. I think it's a huge plus to go down that path, to some degree, and Tesh too, because we had Tesh on one of their stations, and you look at the numbers and you listen to it and you go like, yeah, people like this.
Yeah, information for your life, right?
Tesh's
thing. The one thing too, I think with podcasting, from the work we do in podcasting, that sort of made sense to me when I saw this, is that podcasting, even though it rhymes with broadcast, isn't quite the same thing. It's not broad. It can be very narrow and very specific, and you get deep content. And there's enough of that deep content to satisfy anyone's curiosity, right? And there's only so much that radio can do on that side, right? Yes, it can be John Tesh. Yes, it can be a morning show that delivers good information. But if I really want to get deep into a topic, and you actually use the example of YouTube, I mean, how specialized is some of the content you see in YouTube? And podcasts are like that as well, right?
Yeah. What are some of the things that you push to people that you talk to who are doing podcasts or podcast companies or things, with this? I mean, obviously the information, but they're probably going to be doing that automatically because that's their interest. That's why they're doing the podcast to begin with. I mean, it's sort of probably a passion of someone to do it. Otherwise they wouldn't bother, because I got to tell you, just doing this channel, it's a lot of work. It's a huge amount of work. Video is certainly more work than audio, but still, and I don't do it every day. If you're somebody who comes up with stuff every day, I'm like, God, you want to which would automatically probably make you learn something, and be entertained.
Entertainment, though, is really an interesting part. I mean, and actually we just did some research by looking at we do a lot of studies for branded podcasts for companies that are producing their own podcast, and are trying to get some feedback in terms of the content and the appeal of the content, but also, what's it doing for the brand and things like that. So, we do ask questions after we ask them how they feel about a podcast. We also ask them questions like, did it tell you something new? Was it interesting topics? Was it entertaining? Did it hold your attention? Was it relevant to you? So we, had, a few thousand listeners that we've done that study with, because we have benchmarks for those things. And we looked at what's the connection then? What is it that actually generates appeal? Which of those things is what really drives the appeal? And we thought to learn something new would be the number one thing. But what was the most important driver of that is entertaining. Is it entertaining?
Interesting.
And that, kind of made sense to me the more, because there's again, there's so many podcasts out there. There's 2 million podcasts. And so there are other podcasts on even very specific types of content. But I mean, I'm a history fan. I love history podcasts. That's sort of my thing with podcasts. And there's thousands of history podcasts out there. And I listen to podcasts to learn something new, but the podcast I choose to listen to is going to be the one that is entertaining.
Let me be the research guy for a second. So would you say, are you pretty much saying flat out, if you went to a history channel or something that was talking about really good information, that to you, in your mind, that would not be entertainment for you? Entertainment would be, if there's a Japanese or a Chinese couple and they have 3 monkeys, and they treat the monkeys like little kids. They talk to them, and just watching that for 10 minutes is unbelievably funny. Clearly, entertaining. There's no information you're getting out of there other than, monkeys can act like real babies and, and little kids and stuff, go get the dishes, and the monkey will go over and get the dishes and bring it back and open up a watermelon and, feed it to the other ones. It's bizarre. When you look down and you're like, oh, okay, it's got 12 million views. Oh, they're making some cash, but that's clearly entertaining. But those history things would not be entertaining to you. Like you wouldn't categorize them as entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, history podcasts that I listen to are the ones that are entertaining, right?
Oh, okay.
Right. That's what makes me choose which history podcasts I listen to are the ones that are entertaining. The one I'm listening to a lot these days is out of Britain, two historians who just have great sort of a knack for British humor. And they will talk about everything. They'll talk about, Babylon to, Boris Johnson, and give you history, but they have fun with it, and they have fun with the ads even that they do. Do you know what I mean? And it's entertaining, but I'm still learning things that I never knew before. And I mean, another example in history is you talk about History Channel. I mean, one of the most successful shows in History Channel was Drunk History. Did you ever hear
Drunk History?
Drunk History.
No.
They got people drunk. They got celebrities drunk, and had them pass on the information. And as the episode got longer, they got drunker and drunker, and sort of lost the thread. But you were learning something, but you were certainly being entertained while you saw that, right?
That's funny. And I would think that would be entertaining, and you'd hear their true talent of storytelling come out, as they kind of veered off and stuff. That's awesome. This is 2022. You do these twice a year, once a year? How many?
We've been doing this for 13 years. We started it back in December 2010, back when the connected car became a thing, and everybody's, oh my God, the connected car, that's it for radio. 13 years later, even when you have a connected car, it's still the number one place you go to listen to audio.
Some things are hard to concentrate in a car depending on your traffic. If you're on a highway, we listen to Sirius when we're driving to Florida. I can throw on, the talk stations, which would be talk. I mean, there's no real podcast on Sirius, but it's talk and you can listen to it. But if I was in a city, it's like, that'd be hard to kind of hold it, because you're like, whoa, what? Too many things that kind of pull your mental thought away.
When you're in the car, you're sort of you're driving in a city. You say you need to be in the moment, radio is in the moment too, right? So you get the traffic report, you get the weather, like you get things that you're kind of connecting to, that because you're driving a car, you've got to be kind of aware of what's going on. And I think companionship too for radio. I mean, you talk about that one of those things that radio does better than music. And actually, if you even look at this chart, you can see it's just a little bit higher on the chart than podcast, but it makes sense, obviously, that you don't get the same sense of companionship from a podcast as you do from radio. And I think when you're alone in the car, particularly, that morning habit people have of driving to work, and they have a morning show that becomes their friend. I think that's still one of those things that create some of that muscle memory, that people still go to the radio to listen. Younger demos often will say, well, do you listen to radio? No, I don't have a car anymore. I mean, for them, it still is something they connect with in the car. For
the 10 or 13 years that you've been doing this, has this, just for the radio part of it, has this changed very much? Some
of these questions and this approach is something we've been doing for the last couple of years. So we've asked similar questions in similar ways, and I can't say it's changed that dramatically over time. It just is kind of naturally where radio lives. Music listening is kind of naturally where it lives. Podcasting maybe is the new thing that's in there that's changed up things a little bit, because people didn't listen to podcasts much if you go back to 2010. We've certainly seen podcast listening grow dramatically over that time.
Well, thanks again. Hopefully, something else will come up, and it won't be another year before we do one of these. Yeah.
Anytime, Pat. I really enjoy the chance to connect. I mean, it's been a long time since. I mean, these things have been, one way that you and I have been able to connect. It's been, probably 10 years before that we really had a chance to sit down and chat. So it's great to have the opportunity.
Yeah, it's been great. I really enjoyed it too. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, sir.
All right. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Special thanks to Jeff Vidler of Signal Hill Insights. Always great to talk to Jeff. He's been doing research for so long, and I have worked with him directly for so long that I know he knows what he's talking about. And it's always great to have him delve into stuff. And this one in particular, because this really pertains to radio. And what it is as a PD, you kind of should be thinking about. It's like, this is where the winning exists. Just playing music, it's not going to get you there. Hope you like this, and if you did, subscribe to the channel. We are pushing up towards 700 subscribers, 700 PDs. Be great if we can get there little by little, baby steps. And also, if you like this or any of the other videos, hit the like button, and also the bell, which gives you notifications of new lessons on the channel. So until the next lesson, see ya!